Hello, everybody. Hi, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you all here. So sorry about that. We just had a couple little technical difficulties, but we're up and running. So we're going to go ahead and get the stream started. Hopefully we'll get some more people joining us shortly. And, if you're just catching up or if you're joining in, you can always catch up and catch the replay later. So thank you all for joining us again this week for ArtSnacks Open Studio Live. My name is Amelia, and I am the artist who goes through all these really cool art supplies that are carried by ArtSnacks and the ArtSnacks Shop, have appeared in ArtSnacks boxes, and I'm excited to get started. Before I jump in and tell you about all of the cool art supplies that I brought and what we're going to be working on today, I'll share that here in Baltimore, we have our beautiful flowers all blooming, which means that my seasonal allergies are quite affected. So I will be chatting with you guys as usual, but maybe just a little bit less, might be a little bit quieter this week. But still be happy to chat with you all and definitely chat with you as you're adding stuff in the text chat over on the side. So if you are not a member of ArtSnacks Mix, definitely go check it out. Some of you might be totally familiar with how awesome the Mix community is, and if you are, fantastic. Glad to have you part of the group. But if you're not, Mix is ArtSnacks' very own social media platform, which is really cool because it's super curated in terms of your newsfeed is going to be full of amazing artwork, updates about ArtSnacks, cool polls and questions about art supplies or art techniques. There's also usually some announcements about things that are going to be coming out in future boxes. So you'll get sneak peeks. There's some really great articles in there on different art techniques. And there's also groups for people who have similar interests. So if you're really interested in drawing portraits, or you're really interested, like if you're in the art journal snacks group or the watercolor snacks group, they have their own section on Mix, and we have our own section on Mix for ArtSnacks Open Studio. So definitely check it out. Mix.artsnacks.co. It's free to join, and you don't have to be a subscriber to join. Everyone is welcome. So we'll recap that again at the end. Also, I didn't share this last week, but if you are thinking about subscribing to either the regular ArtSnacks box or the ArtSnacks Plus box, you can use the code ENJOY20 at checkout, and you can take 20% off your first box of an ArtSnacks or ArtSnacks Plus subscription plan. So that's pretty cool, and you can do that over at shop.artsnacks.co. And then, of course, this month there is a marker sale going on. If you go in the ArtSnacks shop and you shop through all the markers, it's 50% off all markers in the ArtSnacks shop. And if you use the code MADNESS at checkout, you can get that discount. So that is also over at shop.artsnacks.co. That's going on now through April 30th. And if you spend $45, you also get a free Marabou graphics pad, which is marker paper. So it's perfect. So you can have all these great markers, and then you can have some really nice paper to use them on. So those are the announcements of all the cool things that are going on over in the ArtSnacks community. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about all the awesome art supplies that I brought, and talk a little bit about what you can do with them. So I brought, let me move my little stickers out of the way here. The first thing I will show you is this Faber-Castell water brush. These are really great for if you're somebody who likes to draw on the go. It's really easy to throw into a pencil bag or a backpack, and you have the water in the barrel here. So you don't have to worry about trying to carry a separate container of water. So it's really nice. You can paint anywhere, anytime with the Faber-Castell Deluxe water brush. It's comfortable and convenient, and has a handy button that lets you easily control the water flow. So that's this button here. It works great for both indoor and outdoor art making, and the thin, smooth bristles are durable but flex easily. So set that aside. I also grabbed just a pen to do some outlining in. This is the Derwent Line Maker. These come in a set of 3. I just have the 0.5 millimeter, just the biggest size in the 3-pack. There's a 1.1 millimeter and a 0.3 millimeter that come with this as well. So these are super fine, free-flowing fine liners. They have a consistent line. They're ideal for drawing, for both drawing and writing. They contain permanent, fast-drying pigment ink, which makes them ideal for adding to watercolor work. And you'll see how we can use this with some of the Tombow brushes. And their high-quality Japanese nib will not damage even under heavy pressure. So you can press really hard with these. I'll get up even closer just so you can see that nib. Try to get it to focus. Hopefully you can see that nice nib. So it's pretty fine even though it's on the thicker side. We'll talk about the Tombows in a minute, but I wanted to show you the paper that I brought. This is the Strathmore Vision watercolor paper. This is in the cold press finish, so it has a bit of a texture to it, and it's a nice heavy paper. You can present your ideas to the world with the Strathmore Vision watercolor paper pad. You tear off the top sheet of the pad to reveal your own customizable cover, which is really cool. So you saw this gray page inside. This page is something that you can draw on. You can decorate it yourself. You could add stickers. If you have a lot of these ArtSnacks stickers, you can decorate it with that. You can use markers, pens. You can even use watercolor on it. I think that's pretty cool. So after you decorate the outside, you can look inside. You'll find 30 sheets of heavyweight 300 GSM cold pressed paper. It makes it ideal for wet media techniques, providing even washes and good lifting. And now I want to talk about the Tombow markers that I brought, because I brought 2 different kinds. You'll see I have them in 2 different containers, and they have different barrels. And the reason is because the type of ink that's inside them is different. So these Tombow ABT markers or brush pens, they have 2 ends. So they have like the thicker brush end, and then on the other side, they have the thinner little fine end on this end. And so these are the dual brushes. They have flexible brush tips and a fine tip all in one marker. And the brush tip is perfect for making intricate shapes, but strong enough for a heavier stroke. And the fine tip works great for consistent lines, graphics, and tighter drawings. And it's water-based ink, which means it's blendable, and the resilient nylon brush retains its point stroke after stroke. So you're not going to lose that nice sharp point. And that's why I brought the water brush, because I can use that with this marker. And it's going to be able to blend out really nicely. We could also draw on wet paper, and it's going to bleed out a little bit, and it'll look really nice. So we'll do that in just a second. And I'll talk about the difference with these markers. So these are alcohol-based markers. And these are the Tombow ADT Pro. It's a permanent dual-tipped art marker. So this does have both sides, just like the other one, except this side has a chisel tip instead of the fine tip. And so it works like a paintbrush to create fine, medium, or bold strokes by simply changing the brush pressure. And the chisel tip provides consistent lines and broad coverage for coloring large spaces. And it's permanent, fast-drying alcohol-based ink. And so it produces really vibrant colors that can be layered to create rich saturation, shading, and color gradation. So these are going to be really different from each other when I use them on the paper. These, if I go over these with, a water brush, it's not going to move. It's going to stay in place. Maybe if I immediately put the water brush down after I lay the ink down, might get a little bit of like a bit of a spreading effect, but mostly it's going to stay in place. But this one, especially if I don't wait too long for it to dry, I'm going to have a little bit of flexibility. So we'll play around a little bit with that. But I separated these out so I would know which ones were which. So we're going to save these for later because I want to start out with being able to blend out my my colors. So I just have the pink and brown, but I think they are going to work really nicely together because they're in kind of a similar color family. They're really warm colors. So I think that we'll be able to get a good bit of value from just those two. So I think I'm actually going to try to pull a page out of this just so that I have more room. So pull that out. These sketchbooks or these watercolor books just have glue binding up at the top, so it's really easy to pull the pages out. But usually when you have like the very first page, sometimes that one, because it's so full of paper, it's a little tougher to get out. Okay, so I'm going to show you just a little bit of swatching. So I'll do half my page swatching and half my page will be a drawing. So I think I'm going to fold it in half. And I might even use some washi tape to really just define the two sides. You don't have to do this, but sometimes I like to delineate which side is which. So I'm curious who's joining tonight on the live stream. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. If you're creating art alongside with me, or if you're just hanging out and just kind of watching. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So sorry, we're going to go for a little ride just to get closer there. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a closer view. So I'm just going to swatch out some of these. So I have this nice wide brush. So you can see you can get a nice bold line and stroke, but you can also get a nice fine line. Hi, Kim. Welcome. It's nice to have you here. You're watching from Iowa. Awesome. Thanks for joining. Are you working on anything or just kind of hanging out and watching? So this is pretty cool too. If you haven't used a brush like this before, you can start out really thin and then adjust the pressure as you go, and you can have a varied line. So you might have thick lines or thin lines, but you have that flexibility, which is really cool. So that's that side of the marker. Oh, okay. You're just hanging out for now. Well, hopefully you'll get inspired to draw something. Maybe you can play around with, if you have some markers or pens, but any art supplies you have, maybe you'll be inspired to doodle something. So I hope that inspiration strikes you. All right, so here is the fine tip end. So you can see this is a pretty consistent width for the line. And I could adjust the pressure, but this one is not quite as flexible as the other side, so I get a more consistent fine line. It's a lot like these fine liner pens. You could play around with adjusting the pressure, but just be careful because, again, this end is not as flexible as the other end. Oh, nice. We have some other East Coast friends joining. Welcome. We have Ember and Sarah. You're from Virginia? Awesome. Oh, and you're drawing along. Oh, or just following along. Okay, awesome. Glad to have you here. So this one is one that looks like it's been in my art collection for a while because it's a little on the dry side, but that's okay because I can activate the ink with water. But I think I've had this one for a long time because it's a little drier. I'm also working on watercolor paper, which means it's going to soak up a little bit more of the ink than regular paper would. But it seems like the fine liner end is still pretty inky for the most part. So I'm just gonna kind of make some blocks of color because I'm gonna activate this with water. The other thing you could do is blend your markers together on the paper. They're really blendable. The water-based ones are. Oh, welcome, Chloe. You're eating dinner too? Nice. I hope you're excited to draw. That's great. I can't wait to see what everybody makes. If you do a drawing along with me tonight, please feel free to share either on Instagram or Mix. You can tag ArtSnacks and we'll definitely check out what you make. So see how I was able to lift up some of that ink on there and I kind of blended it together to make this sort of like dark rosy color. And now I can kind of lift it up and almost use it like a watercolor mark on the paper. And so this is like the true like color of that brush that was a little on the dry side. So the nice thing about these water-based pens is that even if you've had one for a while and it's kind of on the drier side, you could still use your pens. So you get a little bit more longevity out of those, which I think is nice. Oh yeah, and I'll show you also that I feel like the fine liner end is a little bit more, well, maybe just the brown one because this one's lifting up pretty well. And I don't know if you can see it as well. It's hard because of things don't always translate as well on camera, but there's like a very, very faint line, which actually is kind of interesting. Like if you want to do a sketch and you don't want to keep all the lines, if you did it in a water brush pen like this, and then you went over it with water, you'd have very, very faint lines that could still guide you, but they wouldn't show up as much. And sometimes that might be something that you want. Oh, Ember, you've used up your Tombow markers a lot. Yeah, they are really, really nice to use for a variety of projects. So yeah, I definitely feel like the markers they get a lot of use. They're great for writing and for drawing, which I think is why I end up using mine up so quickly. Okay, so I'm switching over to the alcohol-based markers now just to show you how these look. I'm using the chisel tip end on these. And you could probably blend them together. Like I'm going to use a yellow to see if I can soften up that harsh line in the middle. So yeah, you could use like a color that's in a similar color family, and that'll help kind of soften out and have less of a harsh edge between the colors if you want them to sort of blend out together a little bit more. And you can mix, let's see what other colors I have. Let's try blue and yellow to make a green color. So if you have some color laid down, could kind of, I'm just experimenting to see like if I'm able to mix a color on the paper. Oh, Sarah, the water-based Tombows are some of your favorite pens. That's awesome. Yeah, there's so much you can do with them. They're really versatile. And they're awesome if you're somebody who likes to do sketching outside. You can use the water brush with them and kind of do almost like a watercolor painting, but without having to carry a bunch of paints together or paints around with you, which is pretty cool. So I kind of mixed a little bit of a greenish color, but it's not the most lovely green. We can try, I do have a green. Let's just try layering it on top and see how it looks. Oops, not that end. Yeah, so you could just layer the colors on top, and because they're alcohol based, you know, they kind of will take over the color that you've already laid down on the paper. So you can see you can get really different effects with the type of ink that's in the pen. So I found that, you know, you can create some really interesting, cool layers with this. And then, of course, you can always go in like with additional tools if you want. So you can layer on some ink pen. like this. And you can get some really nice marks that are bold on top of the color. So it just depends, like if you want to make something that's more designy or illustrative, kind of bold and graphic, you could create some really nice background colors and then do a really bold graphic line drawing on top. The same with this. You know, you can really go on top of there. The thing with working with the water-based markers is just you really want to let them dry all the way before you start going on and adding too much on top. Because your paper is going to be soft when you add more water to it, of course. And the nice thing about watercolor paper is that, you know, it soaks up a lot of that water, but that means that it's going to take longer to dry. So you just want to give yourself plenty of time to let that dry. So you can see there's a couple different ways that we can use the materials. It's not just drawing right on the paper. And I'll show you too how once this type of marker is on the paper, it's on there. It's not going to go anywhere, which is pretty cool because if you want to, you know, add something on top of that or layer, you know that color's not going to go anywhere. It's in the paper. It's soaked in. I do think that a different kind of paper might be more useful for something like the alcohol-based markers, especially like a marker paper, because it's not going to soak up as much of your ink, but it's still going to show nice, vibrant colors. But I do think that it's nice to work on the watercolor paper with the water-based ones because you're able to, you know, it's going to soak up more of the water on the paper. So that's why I picked that. But I think if you're going to experiment with markers, you should try different types of surfaces and see what works best for you. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just catching up on the chat, and I see that Chloe's here. Welcome, Chloe. Glad to have you here. We have 2 Chloes. Awesome. So that's really fun. Okay, so I'm not really sure what I want to draw, but I kind of was thinking that I might just kind of make up a landscape. So I think I'm just going to kind of do something that I'm imagining in my mind. And it's not, we're just going to see where it goes. You know, I don't really know what the end is going to look like, but, you know, sometimes that's the fun of drawing. You don't always have a plan. You just kind of see what happens. So I'm just kind of starting to lay down like a layer of my base color, and then I think I'm gonna use my brush pen from there. So I'm using the little button part just to squeeze out a little more water, not too much. And I'll grab a paper towel just to have. I always keep my little scrap paper towels. So I can use them more than once when, especially with painting stuff. So a trick with especially atmospheric types of landscape paintings, or really anything that has a sense of depth to it, a trick is that as things recede out into the distance, they're lighter in value, and they also have less detail. So if you think about the last time that you've looked out into the great wild yonder, maybe if you were driving through like a particularly, you know, nature-y type area, or maybe somewhere that has a lot of hills with trees or mountains or something, you'll notice that as you look off into the distance, they look kind of misty almost, even if it's a clear day. And that's just atmospheric depth. And it's a really great way to kind of create a sense of distance happening in your painting. It'll also bring things to the foreground. So the darker something is, the closer it appears. So if there's something particularly important in your painting that you want to draw attention to, maybe put it in the foreground so that it's clearer for the viewer to see. Okay, so I'm just making a really nice kind of gradient. And I'm just going to build kind of off of that. And I guess there will be some trees. And yes, these trees are happy and little. They are happy little trees. I'm not going to worry too much about making them super detailed because, again, if they're off in the distance, that's information we wouldn't really be able to see. Even if you have super good eyesight and you can see all those little details, you don't have to include all of it. It might help too, like if you want to just pick up some of the ink, but you don't want it to be super dark. You could definitely just have like a little scrap piece of paper or something and use that to pick up the ink so that it's not super dark. The other thing you can do is use a palette. If you have a ceramic or plastic palette, you can just rub your marker into one of the palette wells, and that will get some ink in there. You can mix that with water too. Oh, hi, Anne. Welcome. Tonight we are working on using Tombow markers with water. We're also using the Tombow alcohol-based markers too to go back in and add some details. So right now I'm just creating a landscape. We're just going to see what happens. There's really no plan. Just, kind of making whatever kind of art decides wants to be made tonight. I'll blend this out, I guess, towards the middle. So you can kind of see that the longer the marker sat and dried and soaked into the paper, it's a little more challenging to pick up. So if you're planning to blend out your markers, you're going to want to blend it out sooner rather than later, just so that the ink is still moderately wet. It'll be easier to work with. And if you could always put more marker down on the paper if you need to. There's no rule that says you can't do that. So it's a little hard to see, but I'm trying to keep the details light because more detail will appear closer to the viewer. So you can, another thing with color is there's a difference between color value and color intensity. So color intensity is how bright and vibrant and shiny and pretty a color is. Color value is how light or dark a color is. And sometimes it can be a little confusing because sometimes the more vibrant a color gets, the darker it gets. But there is a difference between the two. So with this, we can get a little bit of value. We can definitely lighten up the color as we add water to it. But the more ink we add, the more intense the color is going to get, not necessarily darker. So it will be useful to have this brown marker, even though it's a little bit dried out. We can still go in and add in a little bit of a darker value because these are two different color values. So if you see them next to each other, this pink, even though it's a very bright, shiny, vibrant, pretty pink, it is lighter in value than this dark brown. So that's going to be really useful. It gives us more flexibility with the actual artwork, which I think is really handy and useful to know, especially as you're trying to build up more value and trying to make things maybe look a little bit more realistic. And the other thing too is that I've kind of pushed the maximum intensity already by laying down this kind of darker layer. So I can't really put too much more dark value in the front. So even though I'm building up more of the color, I've kind of hit a wall with how dark it can get. So it'll be really helpful to add in the brown, just to add a little bit more to the overall value of the piece. So that's I think a really helpful trick. It's something that when I learned that, I was like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense, and it helped a lot with whenever I would do. It doesn't have to just be landscapes. I mean, it can be any composition. It helped me a lot with kind of figuring out my compositions. So I'll go in and add some more of this nice dark brown. So this is probably going to be like where the darkest part of my composition is going to be. Right in the foreground. I like this really lovely pink color. I don't know if everyone else has these trees by them, but in Maryland, we're really close to DC. We're just a couple, like an hour and a half away from DC here in Baltimore. And we have a lot of the really pretty cherry blossom trees, like you know how they have in DC. We have them in Baltimore too, and they have all been blooming, and they're so pretty. They when the wind blows, all the petals blow off into the wind, and it almost looks like snow. It's so beautiful, even though all the little petals are on my car's windshield. And they're definitely, I think, contributing to the seasonal allergies. I'll forgive them because they just are so lovely. But they're the same, like, really pale pink color. So that color makes me think of springtime. Just with, you know, how in bloom all the trees are. It's really nice. But we have all kinds of other things in bloom right now. I think not the Bradford pears. I think those are coming a little bit later this summer. They do not smell as nice as some of the other trees that we have blooming, but I think we have magnolias and dogwoods are blooming. All of the bushes like azaleas and rhododendrons, all the tulips and daffodils and dandelions are blooming. So it's beautiful, but it's definitely making me sneezy. How about everyone else? Do you guys have all kinds of things blooming right now? Is spring in full swing where you are? Or are you still kind of waiting for everything to start to come back? It's definitely a really inspirational time of year, I'll say, because all the colors just make me want to go and make some artwork. It's very inspiring. Oh, you're having a wildflower super bloom in California. Oh, my friend who lives in California was sending me pictures of all the poppies. That's pretty amazing. And Ember, everything's yellow. Yes, you're on the East Coast too, right? So yeah, you know all the pollen. Oh no, Angela, bunnies ate all your crocuses. Red buds and buttercups. Oh yes, we have those too. Yeah. So I love it, and yet I think I'm ready for it to be over. It's just been a lot of pollen. But it's okay. We'll get through it. We'll be all right. So you can see I'm kind of just building out some of that value and see how the stuff is really coming forward. And I like how when I initially put the marker down, we're still getting some of that like light and dark kind of coming out and makes it look kind of grassy, which I think is really neat. Oh, Jean, yeah, I remember you were saying last week that you were still waiting for the warm weather. So you just got snow. Oh, yeah, and Pure Friend also. Things are starting to bloom by you too. Soon. It'll come soon. Yeah, we have really humid weather where I am, so I'm just enjoying the dry air while I can, because soon enough it will be very, very humid where I live. So I will take the the polleny dry air for now. Alright, I think I want to add another tree. And you know what? I think I'm going to try something. I have an idea. I think I'm going to try mixing the colors on the paper over here. And then, because I want to get kind of like a middle tone somewhere around here. And so now what I can do, aha, that's what I was trying to get, is this kind of medium pinky brown kind of color. And that worked. I don't want too much. So yeah, I think a color, or not a color, a palette, just like a paint palette, would work really nicely for this technique. So if you have one, you want to try it out, I think that that would definitely help a lot. Something I like about this kind of technique too is that you don't have to be too worried or too fussy about getting everything perfectly realistic. You can kind of just like make some marks, and the person looking at it, their mind will fill in what the details are. And you'll be able to kind of figure out what you're looking at. Okay, so now I think, so I'm gonna try to, I'm futilely trying to dry it more quickly by fanning it a little. A nice trick if you're working on something and you're feeling a little impatient and you want to move on to the next step, but your paper's not dry yet. I think I've mentioned this before, but my advice is to use a hairdryer and not a heat gun. Sometimes heat guns just have too much heat in them and they can cause your paper to get too toasty. And sometimes it can burn your paper. So a hairdryer is nice because it's a little more on the gentle side. Just takes a tiny bit longer. So if you are excited to move on to the next step, but you are like, well, I think it's too wet for me to do anything else. Hairdryer is a good trick. I'm excited to see this color. Hold it up a little closer so you can see the color a little more. This is like a dark kind of maroon color. I think it will go perfectly with this color palette. But this is the alcohol-based marker. So I was waiting to have my watercolor or water-based layer down first, so that I can draw on top of it. This is gonna kind of seal what I have. So I'm not gonna be able to lift this up. So once it's on, it's on. But that's okay. Nothing to be afraid of. Just go ahead and dive in, and whatever happens, happens. And I think it's gonna look really nice and really pretty. And I can always kind of go in with a bit of a lighter color too. So if I want to kind of lighten it up a little, I'm going to keep this really light yellow on hand because it's the lightest one that I have. I think that could help to make things a little less intense if I need it to be a little lighter. Oh, April, you use a hairdryer often? Yeah. It's a really handy tool to have. And if you have an old one that you don't really use for actually drying your hair, it could be really nice just to hang on to it and keep it in where you have all your art supplies. Keep it in your little studio space, wherever that is. Whenever I do these kinds of organic landscapes, I always like to just add little marks in. That's what I was just kind of saying about how I like how things don't have to be really realistic. You can, it'll read as a landscape, even just some little mark making in there. Oh, thank you, Lee. Yeah, Lee just posted in there a reminder that it's Marker Madness Month. So if you missed my announcement earlier, if you use the code MADNESS at checkout, you can get 50% off all markers. So if you're interested in trying out some of these Tombow markers, they're included in the sale. So you can get a nice deal. And if you're feeling really excited about stocking up on markers, if you spend $45, you get a free marker pad, which is pretty cool. Oh, Angela, nice. You just opened your ArtSnacks box. Oh my gosh, how exciting. Yeah, it's definitely a broad range of materials and colors. It's pretty awesome, just the kind of stuff that's in there. And I love that everything's curated, so you know that it'll all work together, which is really fun because sometimes, you get an art supply that you've been eyeing up and you're not sure what to use it with. There's some very smart, cool, knowledgeable people at ArtSnacks that are putting together those boxes. So they're definitely thinking a lot about how people are going to use those tools and how they're going to use them together. And that's really nice because, even if you're just experimenting with something, you'll kind of have a little set to work with, which is really nice. Your mind kept sliding back to a fruit motif. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, fruit motif is always a classic, like go-to art subject. Yes, yeah. The ArtSnacks team went to art school, so they're super knowledgeable about all things art. They're definitely experts, so you can really feel good about knowing that they know what they're doing, which is pretty cool. So now I'm just going in with some of this yellow. I'm just going to kind of add some really, really subtle details. I don't think you guys can even see it. It's so subtle, but let me try to hold this up a little closer so you can see. So I added in just a tiny bit of yellow, but I think it looks pretty cool. It's super subtle. And I think colored pencil on top of this would look so pretty. You could really add some layers of detail. And the other nice thing is that it's more opaque because it's wax based, so it'll sit on top of this. So if you wanted to add some kind of lighter details on top, that would look really nice. I do have some colored pencils sitting next to me, so I might grab a few just to put them in. But these look kind of like dandelions. It's pretty cool to throw out this little field. Oh, okay. Angela, you got a box several months ago and you were uncertain about how to use the colors. Okay. Yeah, so sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge. But that's kind of fun too because it's kind of encouraging you to use your creativity to do that problem solving. Um, hmm. So you Googled color names and clicked images and you got inspired. Oh my gosh, what an awesome technique. I love that. Yeah, see, you were kind of faced with that limitation and then thought about, what ways can you adapt to that and make some decisions about, getting inspiration. That's so smart. I love that. Using your resources. That's great. So now I'm going in, since I have my fine liner, I'm going to try to zoom in even just a teeny bit more. So we're going to go for a little ride. Go. And because I want you to be able to see what all the little details I'm working on are. Because I'm looking quite tiny. But I added in a couple little swirls just to kind of look like flowers. And I'll add some little speckles to look like perhaps pollen. Maybe these are the little pollen particles. Everything is in bloom over here in this drawing too. That's me out in the distance somewhere coughing and sneezing. Oh, Sarah, you're gonna use your Woody pencils. Oh, that's great. I used those a couple of weeks ago, and I'm obsessed with them. They're so awesome. They are these really cool, thick pencils. They're like colored pencils, but they also can act as a crayon, and they're water soluble, so you can use them with water, just like these markers. So you can use them like watercolor paints too. I can't resist. I have a couple of these colored pencils near me. So I'm just going to go in and add some little details. I think these are going to be dandelions. Kind of peppering this little field. It's really light, but I hope you can see it. There's kind of like some highlights in there almost. I did that on purpose so that you could really see it kind of stand out against the slightly darker pink. And I could even, let's see what other colors I have. I can add some burnt yellow too. I like this paper because when I press down on it, it leaves an indent, and that's just so satisfying to me. Yeah, go in with a little bit of pink too, just kind of. Also, I have just a little drawing table, but I kind of keep my most favorite art supplies out all the time, and I just have them in old cups that I don't use for my rotation for drinking cups anymore. Or they're too fancy and I'm scared I'll break them, so I use them for my pencils instead. But I keep my favorite art supplies out on my desk all the time so that they're right there for me to grab very easily, because I know that I'm going to use them for most of my projects. So it's nice just to have them handy at all times. I'll go in and just put a little detail here. So sorry to be coughing on here. I just can't help it. Let's see, maybe I'll add just a little more of these. Actually, I don't think I have one nearby, but something else that could work really well would be like a paint pen or a jelly roll pen. If you have a white pen, you could go in and add some little speckles. I don't think I have one sitting near me close enough to grab. Oh, actually, I do have one of these Posca Uni pens I got in an ArtSnacks box. And I'm just going to add some little speckles. Maybe these are like teeny little white flowers. Oh, nice. I'm catching up on the chat, and I see that Erin just packed woody pencils for a life drawing workshop. How cool. That sounds really fun. And then Pure Friend used supplies from the January box. So you're also using woody pencils? Great. Oh, and Jean just got her first woody pencil. Very cool. Yeah, they're really great. I was so pleased with them. I ended up getting the whole set because I just loved them so much. And so they're really fun. It's nice to have a lot of colors. Yeah, jelly rolls are awesome. You have all of yours with me. Yes. Yeah, there were some jelly rolls in one of the ArtSnacks boxes recently, and I've been using them to write all my notes at work. And it's so fun because I used to write in my diary as a kid in jelly roll pen. So it's been really taking me back. It's been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it. And it's just like been a nice little trip down memory lane. And it, if I have to take notes at work, if I at least get to take them in sparkly pen, kind of makes the fact that I'm at work a little bit more enjoyable. So, it's the little things sometimes. Just gonna add a little more of my middle tones. Maybe a shadow. Oh, yes, I haven't thought about that. I think a shadow would look nice. Add just a little variation in the values here. And just make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Not too three-dimensional, just a little bit three-dimensional. Still want it to just kind of look like a silhouette. Oh, Sarah, now you have lots of brush markers and pens. Well, you can never have too many. Especially if you're like me and you're kind of like have several different pencil pouches and several different bags going at once. Sometimes I'll be like, what bag did I put that in? Why can't I find that? Where did it go? So sometimes I like having extras. Wow, that was really fun to do. I didn't use all my colors, but I did go in with a little bit of the alcohol marker just to add some more value and some more detail. But I ended up liking it being a monochromatic drawing so much that I didn't want to stray too far. But I mean, you could really use any colors you wanted. I like sometimes to just have a limited palette. I feel like I'm a little more challenged to focus on different things other than color. So in this case, I was challenging myself to think about color value, where I could get my light and dark from, with just using a couple of colors and not having any black or white to add, just working with a few different color values. So that was pretty fun. And I think this was a really cool experiment. I'd used the Tombow markers and water color or just water brushes before, but it was just fun to play around with it and try something different and just feel inspired to grab other art supplies and see what goes with it and how I can kind of play around with that. I'm going to zoom back out. So I'm going to be as gentle as I can, zooming you all back out a little bit. Here we go. So now you can see the whole scene a little bit more clearly. You can see the drawing and the swatch pages. Even if it's not the same piece of paper, I do always like to have a little scrap paper next to me just in case I need to test a color or I want to see how something's going to look before I put it in my final drawing. It's really, really useful to have that handy when you're doing your drawing. So, if you have a little scratch pad, I would recommend the same kind of paper that you're working on just so you can get a clearer idea of what the effect will be. But it can be really useful just to have that nearby, and then you can, play around and see what will happen. So here's my drawing that I did with my Tombow markers. I'm just going to do a quick recap of everything I brought with me that I worked with. So I had the Tombow dual tip markers, I had the alcohol based, and I had the water based. So I had two different kinds of Tombow markers. I also had a water brush. This is the Faber-Castell Deluxe water brush. And I had a fine liner. I chose the Derwent Superfine Line Maker. These were not planned, but spontaneous grabs were a luminance pencil and a Uni Posca pen. I also had my ArtSnacks washi tape handy. I always have that handy just in case. You never know when you might need to add some tape. And the paper I was working on, this was the Strathmore Vision watercolor paper. Gosh, this paper's nice. I hadn't had a chance to try it yet. and it's very, very like heavy but also soft, and you can really layer a lot on it, which is really nice. So that was a really fun experiment for me. And I'll show you my reminders just in case you missed them about the marker sale, which you've heard about a couple times tonight, using the code MADNESS to take 50% off all markers in the ArtSnacks shop, and that's going on through April 30th. If you are thinking about subscribing to ArtSnacks, either the regular box or the plus box, you can use the code ENJOY20 at checkout at shop.artsnacks.co. You can get 20% off your first box. And if you're not already on ArtSnacks Mix, please join us over there on the community. It's really great. I always like to, check it out and see what people are working on. We do have our own Open Studio group over there. So please head on over and share whatever you've been working on. And feel free to post what you drew if you did any drawings tonight. I'll write it here. You can use the hashtag ArtSnacks Open. Oh, I gotta spell it right. Open Studio. So you can use the hashtag ArtSnacks Open Studio. You can tag at ArtSnacks anything that you worked on, and we'll all take a look at it and just check it out. So thank you all so much for joining me again this week. Sorry about the technical issues at the beginning, but it all worked out in the end. Stay well, and I will see you guys next week. All right, so have a good night. Bye.